Boker Tov. So we have been discussing the enactment of Rabbeinu Gershom in France and Germany not to marry more than one wife. And last time we discussed both the geography of where this enactment was meant to be adhered to, and secondly, whether there is a time frame to this. We concluded that still nowadays the Ashkenazim take this on, maybe not from Rabbeinu Gershom, but at least mikoach minhag, because of the what's happened over the last 1,000 years. Now, we find in the Rishonim, before we get to practicalities of this nowadays, we find in the Rishonim various exceptions to Rabbeinu Gershom. And with each of these cases, there is great discussion and great detail, but very broadly. Firstly, a man who has been married to a woman for 10 years. Now, there are opinions, and we'll discuss this sometime in the future, that if a couple have been married for 10 years and they have been unable to have children, then the husband needs to marry another wife to be able to have children, because as we've learned, the mitzvah of peruruvu and shevet, and this couple are not able to do it together to fulfill this mitzvah. And so then there is a duty to marry another wife. We see this with Avraham and Sarah, that the Gemara lends us out from Avraham, that the Pasuk tells us that after 10 years of being with Sarah, not being able to have children, he then went and attempted to fulfill the mitzvah of having children with Hagar, his maidservant. And so, in the Rishonim we find that even Rabbeinu Gershom would agree that in a case where a man is married to a woman for 10 years, and for whatever reason, he's unable to have children with her, then he would be allowed to marry a second wife. Of course, nowadays, if we were able to ascertain who the problem lies with, and we are 100% certain that the problem lies with the male rather than the female, then there would be no point in doing this. The whole idea was in those days where it was uncertain, and so it wasn't working with one wife, so one would attempt to have children with a second wife. And so this is one exception we find, that Rabbeinu Gershom, in a case where a couple are unable to have children after 10 years, perhaps he would allow to marry a second wife. And indeed, the Rama brings this opinion. He also brings those who say even in such a case not. But that's already far greater grounds to be able to marry a second wife. Secondly, a woman who nishtatet, who has become retarded, who is become insane, and this is a major issue, because it's a woman who is fully insane. It's not possible for a man to divorce a wife who is insane. So it wouldn't be possible to do kiddushin to such a woman either. But in a case where a man married a woman, and at the time everything was okay, and then Bar Minan, she fell into a coma. She had an accident, fell into a coma, and it's not possible to divorce such a wife halachically. That's a major issue. And so in such a case, many of the Rishonim write again that one would be allowed to marry a second wife, even according to Rabbeinu Gershom. And even in the places where he made this takana, one would be allowed to marry such a wife, because Rabbeinu Gershom didn't make the enactment in such a case. And so this is applicable still nowadays, where you would get legally and civilly divorced, but halachically you would still be married to that person, and then be able to go and marry a second wife. As halachically you'll be married to a woman. There are details in doing so, and how it would be done, which we'll discuss. But that's a second exception. A third one is with a yavama. So a yavama, if you're married to a woman, and then a person's brother, the husband's brother, dies, having been married to another woman, and he dies without children, so then there is the Torah mitzvah of yibum. Now again, something we'll discuss a long time in the future, is that we don't do, according to some opinions, we don't do yibum nowadays. We do halitza only, not yibum. But in principle, again, in such a case, because the expression used in the Rishonim, this has fallen to him from heaven, i.e. Hashem has made this happen, he now has, and we're not expecting him to divorce his first wife to be able to fulfill the mitzvah of yibum, then he would be able to marry a second wife. There are some more exceptions to all of this, but those are some of the major ones. And tomorrow we'll talk about the most famous and most key one, which is still used nowadays.